That's what we normally do. Yeah, it was the very first thing I tried to actively start. Like Pete and I have talked about this a bunch on the pod.
Yeah.
That like we both kind of needed actual projects in order to properly learn how to code.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to learn like in the abstract, just trying to like work through, navigate the syntax. You just work with a project that you've got.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this was the first thing. Dived into, I wanted to have an excuse to play with cursor a little bit.
You digging cursor?
God, this is controversial.
I have hit record, by the way, so this is the good stuff. Well, let's start with
we're introing?
Yeah, that'll do.
That's usually enough. As you know, it's pretty informal.
Yeah.
Over here, it's just chat over coffee. We've got a second guest, Pete. It's you and me plus Gav Fielding.
Hey, folks.
This is cool. So, I don't know if we want to do like a little intro for you, but
I was going to carry on with the cursor chat.
Oh, we can.
Yeah,
I mean, we can. I just thought let's
news of the week. We'll get
I'll get around to it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously controversial timing now because they messed around with their billing last week, so it's about half as effective for me as it was like the week prior.
They did, or you did?
They did, yeah.
So they said they gave everybody like, oh, you pay us what, like $100-$200, and you get an unlimited amount.
Unlimited, yeah.
And then the unlimited amount with like asterisks, like reasonable quantities, and reasonable quantities turned out to be like nothing, and people were just blowing for it in a day. But
yeah,
I mean, this was my experience of using cursor. Like about a year ago, was I couldn't use it for more than a couple of days without just blowing like all of them, like the good models. I wasn't allowed them anymore, even though I was paying for them like pretty early on. And it was a good deal. It was like $20, and you were supposed to get like as much Claude Sonnet 3.5, whatever it was at the time, as you could eat. But you just couldn't. So I just moved to just different apps where I could just pay as I go, which were hideously expensive in terms of like the costs of you pay for your API access. But compared to actually just working with another human, it was remarkably cheap. So I was like, well, this is just cheaper than working with somebody else. So
yeah, you still got to kind of know what you're doing though.
Yeah.
The question I'd have for you though is, were you vibe coding or were you slow coding?
I was pretty slow coding with those.
Were you?
Yeah,
that's surprising.
Back in those days. It's only
Is that what they call regular coding now?
That's what we've started calling like.
I refer to slow coding as you're still working with AIs and you're still moving like very fast.
Yeah.
But you're actually looking at the code.
Yeah. Well, I would even take it a step further. It's like you're planning out the entire project with one of the better thinking models, and then you're moving into the agent mode in Cursor once you've got the whole thing scoped out. And I think that, and you still do it really quick. It's funny. Like the examples I give to Pete every so often is I'll plan out a project, get a PRD written up, and Claude will be like, yeah, this will take 12 weeks. And I'm like, lol, see you in 10 minutes.
That's what, I find that in general with anything that I'm doing is actually like you still go through all the processes of like the thinking bit, the unpacking bit, the designing bit, the like what's the actual project plan, what are the steps, who are the people you need to use, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you build that out, and then you do each one in chunks.
We talked about this a bit with like the move of software development that went from like waterfall systems into agile 20 years ago, whatever, and then agile's been the dominant thing. We're saying like, well, what's the new version of that with AI? And we said it's not really agile anymore. It's more that you actually reinforces like all the stuff you used to do in waterfall to do it correctly becomes really important. And we're kind of going back to what we call like super fast waterfall, which is you go through the entire process, but you do it with a set of AI agents that help you along the way, and you do it very quickly. So like, whereas one, like waterfall project might have taken you 9 months previously, now you do the whole thing in about a week, if that, or you break it into smaller iterations and you do it in like a day.
And the limiting factor is the context window of whatever the tool is that you're using.
It's probably more in the context prep, I think. Like, I'm not such a big fan of context windows. Mostly, I think, because the problem with like the big context window is like it's like the hammer to screw in a nail, which is like, I've just mixed several metaphors there. Like, screw in nails, Pete. I think we went through that.
Yeah, we've had that last week.
Like
I haven't listened to that one.
Hammer to screw, you know, like.
But I'd love to see some of your home renos.
my home renos have been pretty good. I'm making my own furniture these days. I've moved from just like hammering together stuff to the van for actually producing well done furniture. I'm quite proud of myself. What I was saying, like the context window is you just like, it's like throwing in more shit and then hoping that the LM will like figure out what's the stuff I need to know inside this context window. Because really what you actually want is absolutely the minimal amount of context that you can get away with, but only the right things. And it's just like, that's, to me, like that's the point of the whole waterfall process, is to get to that point where you go like, the bit that you need to know for this task is like this.
Yeah, I think that's two different things.
Yeah.
Because there is that kind, and this is the sort of conversations I've been having, and what I even notice, like back in the pre-AI world, which I think we've had a chat about before, it's like some people just don't realise the amount of like context that they have, even just when they're communicating with, like, we're in the same city, we speak the same language, we went to the same school, we went to all that sort of stuff.
Like everybody else in Perth.
There's
one school in Perth, but everybody went there, at least for a little while.
But all that, like, same culture, same, like, all that sort of stuff, down to, like, where languages came from, and all that sort of, like, all that is context that we just have when we talk in a conversation, or if you're a manager having a conversation with the person, to one of your team, and you need to get them to do something. But you don't have that context with or like all the intelligence and stuff is there, but you've got to actually wrap it in whatever the context is.
I agree with
that
so
you need.
much. Yeah.
But when I say the context window is the limitation, because I got to a point where, like, I'm using Claude a lot, and I'd always run out. It says like, this chat's too long. And this is and it's like, okay, I've got to chunk this down into smaller steps to then do that bit within the context window and take that and put it into the next one, and do that bit within and take that and put it to the next one. Whereas like before, like waterfall stuff, it's just like, it's almost like the time, hey, this needs to be done by then.
I find that's a lot easier to navigate now with projects. I think, like, I'm way less likely to hit limits now by using projects, because it also means that I can get a core set of knowledge or context popped into the project, and I can go off different tangents in individualized chats. So the chat itself is more structured, and then you can.
Projects get,
depends what it is, right?
Like, as I'm working on one at the moment, and after you get too many chats in it, it just starts to fall apart. Yeah.
I think the other thing there is, like, you do need to be a little bit deliberate and manual about how you prune the information you're extracting from the various chats, and then baking that back into the project knowledge as well, which is something that I do a lot of. So I'll basically get key summaries of things that I've highlighted that are important in the chat, get that in Markdown, pop that back into the project knowledge, and I find then that when I go into a new chat, then that's just easier to navigate, and I almost never hit limits doing it that way. But I know before they introduced that, it was the same experience for me. Like, I would just constantly hit those limits. Would be very frustrating, because then you're like, okay, write me a prompt that summarizes everything we've talked about so I can start this in a new chat, and I just never do it as effectively as you wanted.
And then you track it back.
It was basically game over.
To find the one bit that, hang on, I needed to update this bit.
So this reminds me a lot of like the conversation we were having with Bill, when we were looking at, like, how do you create like a digital twin or a clone of a person, and their knowledge and their knowledge base. And we were saying, like, a lot of the ways that people will go about this is they'll say, like, okay, well, I'm going to create like a chat bot for my company, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get like a bunch of documents, and I'm going to put them in the thing, and then I'm going to ask questions about it, and it's going to answer as though it knows about my company, and it's almost like half the job, if you know what I mean, because what you've done is you've done the bit of, like, you know, if Gav knows a bunch of stuff, and I can be a bit like Gav by knowing the same stuff, and I might answer some questions factually the same way because I'm pulling from the same, like, RAG database or whatever it is that's in the background. But what I've not done is any of the stuff that you mentioned a moment ago, which is, like, you know, where are you from? What's your context? Like, what language are you in? What are your norms? How do you talk? And, like, all of this sort of stuff. And that separates up nicely into, like, there's the things you know and there's the things you are. And I don't think what like the bit that's not as well explored, I think, in the AI space is the programmatic, the thing you are piece.
Yeah.
Which is like, how do I look through somebody's like life work and then distill that down into who is the thing that they are?
Yeah, and how's that? How it's almost like an underlying layer of context within then the top layer, surface layer of stuff, which is the chat.
It's like, you know, who is this person? Like, what are their mission at the moment right now? And like, what are their values? And like, what do they believe in? Like, how do they communicate? And you just wouldn't, you can do this manually. Like, you can, like your first chat with Claude, you can go, right, Claude, you're this, you're going to be a bit like this, you're going to act in this way, your values are this, like you believe this, and this, like here are all your core things.
Yeah.
And then it gets a bit like, oh, but I'm not going to do that every time. And then you get into like, you know, okay, well, I'll do a project and I'll have a system prompt in there and I'll put everything there, and that makes act. And you see the differences. It'll act a lot better at this point in time. And then because it's always got that every time you start a new chat, it has a thing that it is plus some things that it knows. So you've got the two different components.
Yeah.
And I think the bigger unlock is probably that there's so much context that goes into, like, if you wanted a real like human experience, is I think that we're not really one mind necessarily. I think we're multiple different sort of like minds or people in a body, and we flip them all the time depending on our situation.
There's an interesting
because you see this, right? You go home like really pissed off from work, and you walk in to like the kids, and you're still being like pissed off from work guy, and it's like entirely inappropriate, and you have to almost like go out, like walk around a block or something, like just completely change context in some way. Like this is a problem with working from home, is like you don't get that context switch and decompress on the way home.
Yeah.
But you need to get into like, oh, I'm the other person now.
Yeah. There's who's the dude who wrote that? Is it Joshua Peterson or Jonathan Peterson or what? That
Jordan
Peterson. Yeah. Always wears like 3-piece and all that sort of stuff. He
12 rules for life.
He talks a lot about like different personalities and all that sort of stuff. I listened to a podcast recently, but is essentially exactly that.
I'm sure he did a worse job.
It seems to me
arguing about definitions and not really being useful.
Use many more words.
I get so annoyed.
Many big words to describe something simple. I think like the other thing that occurs to me with that chat is that it's a pretty opaque thing for other humans when they're interacting with humans, right? I mean, like there's who you say you are, it's who you think you are. There's who you actually are. I mean, on those levels, and those things are constantly changing, you know, as Pete mentioned as well. It's really hard for anyone to really have like that really clear context when they're dealing with another human. I think that's what is one of the challenges of just interoperating with other humans. Like that's
interesting though. Like, but we've got vision and hearing. We pick up like body language cues, all that sort of stuff. How does this play out when, like, that's why Zucks is throwing all these like glasses and doing his like things with Ray-Bans and all that, and Musk has Teslas flying around capturing vision everywhere. I think it was the head of AI of Meta said like all the written down words and information in the world has been consumed and learned with, like, they've learnt it all in the AI LLMs and that sort of stuff, and that equates to the same amount.
That's so much hubris.
Yeah.
We've done writing.
Yeah.
But it amounts to, you might know, like the like bits and like the kind of like information math of it all, but it's like it equates to like 4 years of human life and the amount of information that goes through like the visual cortex and what they hear and all that sort of stuff.
Well, even like smells and shit like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's all this stuff we don't even notice is going on. But.
Yeah, but there'll be a point where that stuff is just like, there'll be sensors and there'll be humanoid robot butlers walking through and like picking up all those cues and all that sort of stuff.
My guess is that like we would look at, say, like if we took a robot butler and we'd say like, well, what is this robot butler doing? Like, I don't think it would be one sort of agent that is like the robot butler. It would my guess is that like we'll start to learn more about maybe how human minds work a little bit, which is that we just have like all of these different people and contexts and things that we can draw on inside ourselves, and we just pick them at runtime for like what's appropriate to this situation. So, you know, I'm not being dancing Pete right now because, which I have been in this room sometimes, but it's, you know, it's just not the mood we're going for, right? At the moment, I'm, you know, sitting back and pretending to be Think Boy Pete. But like you choose like which parts of yourselves and like which context that you want to bring up. But if you bring too much to it, then it gets confusing and like nobody knows what's going on. I think you see the same thing in AIs, where again, like you need the context for like the context window of the who you are and the what you know, both need to be appropriate for the situation. Yeah. And so you almost have this like multi-level filtering of going like, what just happened? Like, how do I need to write? What's appropriate for this? And you're like, you filter down to effectively getting into like one little agent that goes like, okay, here's everything that's going on right now. Here's exactly how you need to be to respond to this, and then you respond. And that could have been like 1,000 different like computations and LLM calls in the background, but to us it'll look like we just said one thing and it did one thing in response. So,
yeah, but it's not dissimilar to how most humans understand another human. Like, only very few people would know, you know, all of the contexts of Pete, right? Like, it'd be family, very close friends. It's the same for all of us. The person you might bump into down the street once a week, or the person you might buy your coffee from, they get a version of you. That's their understanding of who you are. That's it. It's not multidimensional. So it'd be quite similar to the vast majority of human interactions in that respect, I imagine.
We also don't necessarily call and response as well, right? Because I'm an absolute bugger for this, I'll admit it. But like when other people are talking, like I have like another track going that's just trying to figure out like, oh, what shall I say next? And I really do try and like listen and be present, but it's I think everybody just does this. Like everybody's thinking like, all right, well, what's that person saying? What do I know? And like things are popping up into your head as you go, and all this stuff is getting presented. It just doesn't come out the mouth yet.
I think that's why they call it active listening. It's like you need to actually be in the mode of listening and taking it in.
I feel like, again, this is kind of interesting, right? From like how do people work point of view, but I often feel like even when I'm like actively listening to stuff as much as I can, like my mind's quite visual, so I almost like see it as like the words that I'm hearing getting put into buckets and stuff. And I'm still going to make links between various different things, and other stuff will just pop up into my head. Maybe I just need to meditate more. Maybe
so like the memory thing.
Maybe I'm coming across as a dick.
You do that thing with the memory thing.
I think just memory part.
Visualize the room, and you put everything in the room to go back and remember.
It's just everything comes out visually for me. Like I find it really hard if I can't. So one of the things that does bug me a little bit about like speech first interfaces for AIs, which I think are good, but in my head, like when I communicate through speech, like I've got a picture that I'm describing to somebody else, and I assume they're trying to recreate a picture in their head, and like the whole speech medium feels very lossy. So I'm always quite quick to move to whiteboards or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's like your learning styles and that type of thing, which I think is going to be both big and then both like game changer as far as like I've got kids on I forget the name of it, but it's like an AI math tutoring app. I mean, like, was sitting there for ages, and I finally like, Gus, here, try this. Straight away he went from like wanting to play video games or do this or now to just and it just engages, and then it presents and it asks context, and then it redesigns the kind of like lesson plan or the interaction to have the context of what and they just like ultra engage, learning it like emails you what they did in a session and what they learned and what they struggled with and all that sort of stuff. It's like epic as a parent. But it's understanding the best ways to communicate. Like some of the stuff, like with the going out to businesses and that, I want to actually start to do intro-sided diagnostics for the business, but then get each person to do like a little mini personality test of how best do I learn and all that sort of stuff, and then that goes into the context to then be, so if this is the output of whatever part of the project it is, here's how we have to communicate to this person and to this person and to this person. And then like that in turn can become part of like helps with the organizational change piece and all that sort of stuff that's coming up. But that sort of stuff is like, it's really important. I've found even just like managing teams, it's almost as important, it, like not even necessarily knowing the differences, but having people know that there are differences, and they go through the process and they like go, oh, we're all different, and then all of a sudden their mind changes.
I've done this in the past like a bunch with like large program rollouts over here with mining companies and stuff, where we would do like a lot of psychological profiling of people and like what their stress states are and non-stress states, and just sharing that amongst the team and getting them to realise that like, oh shit, like that's why he's acting like this. It's I can see it under the surface. All of a sudden people become a bit more forgiving of each other, give them space. But I think that's quite interesting in an AI context as well. I can see it being
like, and
get
it's
the information across.
And also because like with the voice things, I find they're getting quite good, but they're still bloody annoying because they keep cutting me off when I'm trying to talk to it.
It's not quite natural, is it? Like, it can't quite make that decision.
I'm like, just wait until I finish and say okay or whatever, and it just cuts you off, and then it completely ruins the conversational aspect.
I wonder how much of it is the lack of visual cues and stuff like that. So if you think about, you get a worse conversation with somebody over a telephone than you do over a video conference than you do in person. And like, most of the time if I'm talking to AI, I'm out walking around in nature and it's in my pocket. And like, if I asked Andy to talk to me from my pocket, he'd probably be like, it's not great for you, mate. Like, I just said some work.
There's a whole bunch of reasons why I don't want to be.
Could pull some threads on that, but we won't. That's true though. It's funny. It's weird. I'm like, does Grok have a voice? Yeah, it does.
It does. Yeah, they made it like, as usual. It was all gimmicky. It was kind of like be a sexy voice, be a
off the rails or whatever thing. Because you know how Musk does those like epic long pauses.
Yeah.
In conversation when he's like thinking of the answer and stuff like that.
Is that a thing?
Like, how come he can't train the thing to respond to him?
I think it's have you tried Sesame? Like the they've only got a demo, I think. I've not actually.
Oh, I've heard. Yes.
It's like I've told Pete about it. It's like I think it's the closest thing to like the movie Her that I've come across from voice, and I think the key is that it will still cut you off. I mean, the demo's only short; it's like 15 minutes.
Is this one of those like AI boyfriend girlfriend?
No, it's just a voice model.
Just a voice. It's like an 11 Labsy.
It's not like predefined. It's just general purpose, but it's the most natural sounding voice that I've tried. But I think like it's like less prone to cut you off if there's like a latency issue. Like if you're taking a short break, because we do this in natural speech, we'll take momentary pauses and I think the visual cue is definitely an aspect of that, but I think they just like elongate it out a little bit. So if there's a pause that's only like a half second or something, we're not going to cut you off. But
it'll be solved when we're all walking around with our AI clips or like whatever Johnny Ives and Sam Altman bring out next.
I don't think
they
not that one.
We'll try and avoid that one, but just to your point about learning though, like ChatGPT just released a tutor mode.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, I think it's, and it basically is like, I haven't tried it, but it's basically just designed to, instead of giving you the answer straight away, it's meant to like walk you through a process to figure out how you might best arrive at that answer yourself, which I think is interesting. But again, I don't necessarily think it's tailored to your learning style, because it's just not going to know.
Yeah, there'd be like an intro and onboarding thing surely in that.
I think over time, like maybe it's a memory thing, right? Like the more it gets to know you over time.
Yeah.
But
see that MIT study, I think it was MIT. There was one of like looking at the brain activity of people using like ChatGPT to respond to things and not.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. I reckon it says more about humans than what it does about AI.
Well, this is another
people who become passive and all that sort of stuff, but general, no matter what.
right? Like you remember, like well, actually, I'm talking to two people from Perth, so this might not work. But because your directions are just go forwards for 400 k's, right, and then it's the left, the first one. It's like, whereas like you'd get like when I was young, you'd get two dads together in the UK, and they'd say something like, "Oh, where are you off to?" And they'd say, "Oh, I'm going from London to I don't know, pick some Coventry." And you'd be like, "All right, you can take the M1 or the A1. You're going to do the A1. You can skip off onto the M69, and then that takes you by the bypass and up through the A1M, M4492 or whatever." And they'd be like, "No, like all of the little back roads, like all the little places that you could go. They know like which places have got traffic at what time." And it was almost like this mental sparring competition between the two people. And then these days, it's just like, I'm going to just press the button in the screen and it will tell me where to go. And like that knowledge is just gone.
Google Maps killed it.
I mean, even when I was a kid, like when I first started to drive, I was using having to like print out maps and directions and then have all the road numbers like on a little stick. If I was going somewhere I completely didn't know any of the roads, I'd just be like, right, well that road goes to that road, goes to that road. And you start to realise the logic of the naming being like, you know, the A1, like the A14 comes off the A1, and that's why it's a 1-4 and stuff like this. And I was like, I was amazed when I picked this, and I was like, that makes loads of sense.
I've never picked that up in like the numbering.
Well, again, you live in Perth.
It's not.
You've got road 1 and you've got road 2.
But even when we were younger and we had like the map book in the car, and you'd have to like stop the side of the road and like flip through it. And
I remember delivering pizzas.
Oh yeah.
And having a little code like. So in the shop, it's like, oh, so here's the address. Okay, I need to, and then having my little code of like 2 right, then like 3, then it's like left, and then on the back of the delivery slip.
But it was also cool because there was like discovery baked into it as well. Like you could get lost, but you also couldn't really get lost in Perth. You know, so there was this process of discovery every time you got behind the wheel. You were driving, exploring, seeing stuff that was new. Yeah.
How's the because I've noticed that, like, just, like, with parents and in-laws and stuff, and it's just, they still want to describe how to get to somewhere. Like, I've got to go here. Oh, are you going to go this way or this way? And I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just going to get in the car and type in the address.
Yeah, my parents do this as well,
There's almost like a lag in the updating of the knowledge and the behaviours in generation.
There's also, like, they're probably, like, driving for way longer in that prior era than they have with maps, whereas most of the time that we've been driving has been with Google Maps.
Yeah.
There was that like small period before. I was like maybe a few years.
Yeah.
But like the recency is just like completely overshone that. Whereas for them it's like they would have had 20, 30 years of driving. You know.
The this is interesting though because I was just listening to a Moonshots Peter Diamandis.
Yeah.
Is that his last name? Like,
X-Prize,
and they reckon there'll be like a century of progress in like a decade.
Do you know what, like,
the way AI is going? And it's like the adaptability.
They probably will.
Yeah, like the adaptability, and Dave Sinclair's got it's like doubling lifespan and health span within the next decade or something. Like that sort of stuff.
I mean,
that's just epic.
I think just the acceleration of software development and like what you can get done and for how little cost, and it just unlocks so many like highly personalized use cases that you just would never have looked at previously. Like you can custom build like AI bots for your own health that are going to give you questions that like, and it's in an area where you almost can't sell that. Like the restrictions around like what you could do that would potentially give somebody some health advice based on all of their data would be so bad that you couldn't commercialize that as a product. But somebody can just write that open source or just tell you what to do and you build it in Claude. And you get.
I'm trying, after you saying that now, I'm trying to like rebuild how you're thinking of it in my head, like you were saying before.
There we go. We've been set. All right, we're about half an hour in. Should we do the intro?
We can probably show you that because I've actually built a version of this already. But
the health thing.
Yeah.
Have you?
I've already done this. Yeah.
Definitely show you that.
So we can.
That's
we can go offline and have a look at that. But yeah, I think it's like a really fascinating use case for AI.
I'm meeting a GP mate, and I've got to pick his brain on how to fix that whole thing, because I think that there's some fundamental flaws in how all that works.
Like, over half their job is admin. It's paperwork, right? And so the window of opportunity they've got with a patient is diminishing every year because they have to do more and more paperwork.
The incentives of the business model is fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. There is like a really interesting question, but let's do a quick intro. I feel like we're going to finish the pod.
I'm quite good at dragging conversations down to
because you've got like quite a diverse background as well, so I actually don't know how to introduce you other than to say you're Gav, you're a digital marketing specialist, branding specialist, and maybe the part that I know that maybe not everyone knows is that you're an artist as well.
Sometimes I've got a painting in the garage that's been hanging on the wall, half done for like 8 months on 12 months, that I'll tinker on every so often.
So not as much.
Not as much now. If I get more free time, man. Like if.
But still an artist. Once an artist, always an artist.
An artist at heart.
Yeah.
Exploratory. When everyone's got heaps of time on their hands, in another 5 years, everyone will be artists.
Yeah. But you've obviously been spending a lot of time thinking about AI and thinking about how you can help companies navigate this space, this transition, and what it means for them. And obviously, we've all been having these kind of chats, so it kind of just made sense to, instead of just keep having these chats over coffee, let's keep doing it over coffee, but hit record.
Yep.
So that's what we're doing.
So like, I don't know, that's a pretty good intro. I don't know how much digital I am anymore, but I sort of started out in that creative space, studied design and advertising, photography, all that sort of stuff. And you get trained how, and this is sort of the creativity piece, you get trained and taught how to be more creative, which is the thing, in my opinion. Like, everyone thinks creativity is this magical special thing, but it's just a volumes game, and you have more ideas. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and you filter them all out, and then all of a sudden you get the really kind of unpredictable but really like good on point one. And nothing's better at doing that than a computer with the volume. You're not going to be able to beat that. So you have a...
So Mad Men lied to me. I don't just have to drink scotch in the office while having a nap, and then eventually just out of nowhere
the idea comes to...
That's the lifestyle part, not the creative.
That's the sale.
You still want the lifestyle part. But like I say, like, it raises the ceiling and lowers the floor. So AI lowers the floor of just like general generic stuff, and just makes all of that real easy. So like, you go and you prompt something without much context or whatever, and it gives you something generic back. But if you really know what you're doing, or you are a really good creative, or you are a really good whatever XYZ expert, it actually raises the ceiling as to what you can do, almost like raises the ceiling to genius. And then that historically was a scarce thing, because you had one genius spending their time to create like one thing, whereas now you can almost like work through and program that and automate that workflow once you sort of crack the code. And then the genius becomes scalable. So it's probably where like agencies and stuff are going. But then you lose the scarcity component, so then it almost like the way that plays out is
like
something
value
else.
trap, right? But it sort of reminds me, I can't remember the name of this principle, but it's the one where like you assume that like something you read in the paper is correct because you assume that it's written by somebody who's an expert, and so you see it written in your field and you go, oh, that's all completely wrong because I know what I'm talking about here. And then you look at everything else in the newspaper and you go, oh shit, maybe it's all wrong and I just don't know because I don't know enough about that field. And I think we have this perception, and like it's definitely a thing with creativity, where people will go, that's literally magic, I don't know how you do that. And then under the hood, it's really just a really systematic way of like working through lots and lots and lots of small tasks that each do use like creativity and intelligence as part of them. But there's a process for how you do it. in the same way that when you hear people talk that are like really good at music or really good at like software engineering, they almost always have like a structured process for how they're going about it. And what you see as like one chunk and one step in that process, to them is actually 20 under the scenes.
You just see the output.
And the people that are really good are often the ones that understand that, can enumerate it to themselves, and then follow it again. And so they get really good like retreading of that process and acceleration.
There is like a really fascinating line here about like what you lose with AI. This is like the Dorman fallacy, right? Where it's like you hyper focus on like a task that you want to optimize or you want to automate, and you underestimate all of the things that was providing. It might be the process itself that you have to navigate through that was giving you like all of this contextual understanding of your craft. And the doorman is a really good one because it's like everyone just assumes you're just opening a door for someone as they walk into a building. But it's like all of the intangible stuff that was doing as well. It's like you're greeting everyone. It's like a customer service experience for everyone on the way in. And you lose like you're building rapport with all of these people that you might just see in that brief interaction at the start of the day or the end of the day as they walk in and out of buildings. And so it's like by narrowly like defining that role down to its like, you know, subatomic part, it's like, okay, well, we can automate that. We have electric doors now that just open and shut as they detect your movement, but we've lost all of the intangible stuff. And so like that's always like an interesting question, which we were kind of like leaning into a little bit before the intro, which is like, what do you lose in this process?
Well, I think it's a bit like the it's like the naive automation of the thing, right? Because if you ask the doorman, he knows that his job isn't opening and closing the door. Yes. It's knowing and understanding all the different people. Whereas like the McKinsey cunt would come in and say like, oh, he just opens and closes the door, and not think to ask a question that's any deeper than that sort of surface level. And therefore they put in the door opener and have that issue. Whereas I think, like as you said at the start of the session here, like it's like what appears to you to be the one thing or the one action that has been going on it's just not the whole story. Like there's layers below that. And I think this is where the AI automation game goes, is that like the key is understanding what's all the layers underneath that are going on here, and how do you pick those apart. Because once you get it at that more granular level of like, all right, it wasn't one thing that was going on, that's important, we can do that bit, but there was like 50 other things over here, let's also get all of that and automate it using the AI. So that's when you get a really good response out of these things.
Yeah, I think this is the risk though, because I think a lot of people are sat around at the moment pontificating on how best to walk into an organization and rewire it, and it's like, well, we don't know. You know, this is the problem with consultants, right? Is they walk into a business they barely understand, because they might go, well, I've worked with similar types of businesses before, but it's like, but not this one. And this one's run by a group of people who've run it for 25 years. So they just know the ins and outs. They understand the things that work. They understand the things that don't work particularly well. They know the names of their customers' kids. You know, like all of this stuff can't really be replicated easily. And I think that's the risk, is if you try to just go right down to the absolute automatable version of a process, it's like there is this like quantum of what is lost that was still valuable that needs to be determined. And I feel like that's a really valuable part of the process that everyone's overlooking at the moment. Everyone's just like, look at this workflow that I've just gone and like now just spits an output out for me without thinking about what was lost in the process. That might be valuable to retain.
I also think this is why personal tools for yourself do a lot better.
That's true.
Because when you're the expert just automating your own job, you tend to account for a lot more of this nuance. And like you see that like, this isn't really doing me properly, so it's probably this bit that needs to go in, or like it's not doing this bit of like what I would usually do.
Yeah. Do you reckon that almost like leans into the purpose problem? Like you automate a whole heap of stuff, and if you play it all out, and I might still have the Period Man's podcast in my head, but like the abundance thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, if everything's abundant, then what's the purpose? And then if you roll that back into automating a thing or going into a business, it's like actually like, what is the purpose of, like, what do you guys want to be doing, and what is your purpose? Because if everything automates and knowledge, but like knowledge and intelligence, right, is becoming commoditized, so that then shifts, and this is sort of where the stuff I'm doing and targeting more like SMB and like traditional service stuff, if that knowledge and intelligence commoditizes, it completely shifts where value comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then it's like, well, how are you going to capture that value? And is it like, did you guys enjoy, or like when you started your business, did you enjoy doing this bit that now isn't actually generating much value? And if you shuffle your business around and do this bit, are you going to still enjoy it? Are you still going to be fulfilled with it and all that sort of stuff? And then that completely, the answer to that question completely changes everything. So it's almost like a, I suppose like I'm like rolling back a bit from where I've come from creatively and then moved into like marketing and brand. I see it playing out, and like your guys like the value track curve, all that sort of stuff playing out, that you really need to be looking at your brand and your purpose kind of now in terms of where the value's shifting and where you want to be at in sort of like 3, 4, 5, however many years when it all plays out, because that's going to be the big tell of survival and really just like enjoyment of life and what you do, why you wake up in the morning. Because otherwise, like if you're not, that's where your motivation comes from, right? And that's where all those little like human interactions and all that sort of stuff, all those little things that come from the doorman experience and people wanting to walk through the door in the first place, as opposed to like, why do I even need to walk through the door?
But there's like an aspect here where it's also highly subjective. Like it really depends. Like that purpose question really depends on who you're talking to. Like we're kind of talking in the macro about like people who are running a business, but if you go back like a few decades and you speak to a typist about whether or not they find a purpose in the work they do, they probably tell you, yeah, this is really meaningful and it's really important because a bunch of people need me to type up these minutes and type up these notes, and like, but for a vast chunk of people, like typing was seen to be beneath them, and that's why you had the typist, right? And then like you fast forward a couple of decades and everyone's typing because everyone's got a computer in their office, and it's, you know, like I think that question is like, it'd be super easy for us to like sit and pontificate on this for everybody, but it's like ultimately like a very personal question. It's like, what do you find purpose in the moment is also relevant here to explore. You know, that's not to say that like some of the things that we do now we're not going to do in 5 years. Very, very likely, and that might be a good thing. But this comes back to this question again. It's like, but what did we lose that was valuable? And that's also hard to, you know.
I think one thing that sits in this space as well is that there's you know, there's like your purpose and values and things, and people would have these, and then there's like the sort of bullshit corporate overlay of purpose and values that you might convince yourself of because you're just doing what you're doing because that's what you do and it's how you make money, and you need money to live and eat and the rest of it. And it might just be, you know, it's completely orthogonal what your purpose actually is to that sort of thing. I don't think everybody sits around only really doing things that they're maximally value aligned with. And so you might say, like, oh, you know, my typing, it's my purpose, it's my dream. It might not be as well. It might just convince themselves of this, but it's, I think there's also like a big, you know, it's like the coming out of the matrix part of the thing there, right? If suddenly, you know, you're in that headspace and that's like what you're convincing yourself of, and then we go like, this job no longer exists, and you go, all right, well I moved to no, that one also no longer exists, like these jobs aren't there anymore. And you're like, oh shit, now I have to like actually figure out what to do with myself. And I've got all this time, and I've got a mortgage, and I've got debts to pay, and I've got children, and you're like, fuck, that's like a real like existential crisis moment there if this hits quicker than some people might expect.
I've been thinking about that a bit lately and had a couple of conversations recently where it'll be like, I'm almost seeing it more as though like every business, every person, there's like a to-do list on every desk that has stuff on it that just doesn't get done because they don't have time to get to it. Or like the minutia and the sort of all the little grind work just gets in the way and doesn't get to the to-do list stuff. I reckon like it's like that to-do list stuff will start happening if you take away the grind work with like your like AI automations and all that sort of stuff.
Maybe it's weird though, because it implies that there was something more valuable in that, because it was not valuable enough, that work, to just not do it, and the grind work was more valuable than that. It's kind of weird, the idea that I would be able to automate the really valuable grind work, but not the non-grind work that I didn't have time to get to. It's weird that it would move.
Could just be the inefficiencies of organisations and the way and how humans interact in organisations and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I think there will be other work. I don't know if it's necessarily the end of the to-do list, though. I guess if I've already unprioritised all this work beyond like just grind. It's like I'm just going to grind for 8 hours, then I'll do the valuable stuff. Like, it's probably not that valuable.
Yeah, if you can put it off endlessly, it probably is.
That might be a bit.
Yeah, that's a tell.
For me,
but also, like, this is David Graeber's bullshit jobs, right? Like, I think everyone's got, like, in every role, there's like a layer of.
There's a whole
shit.
tower of bullshit jobs.
Yeah, I know. We're sat in an area where there's a lot of bullshit jobs, but yeah,
maybe on there to do this thing, it's more like when you do your strategic planning and all that, and it's like, oh well, here's all the good ideas we could be doing. But we only have the resources to do this one or these two.
Yeah.
And then those ones, the ones that there's that opportunity in that stuff.
To argue against myself, I'd say like certainly in the SMB space.
Yeah.
Like there's just way more of that constraint. And that people can't get to those jobs and they don't have staff lying around to do it. Just tons. I mean, that's why I find that space like more interesting in many ways, because it's the area where you were already resource constrained with people and you had bigger plans and ideas and you could never deliver them.
Yeah.
And so it would be really interesting to use AI to accelerate this, and you actually get to go and do all this stuff. And then we get like really efficient smaller companies, and like that I think would be great for the world, versus like just another big corporate getting 10% better every year doesn't really interest me.
This is also like an aspect of the value trap that I've been thinking about as well, because there is this like debate I have with myself about whether or not some companies will actually just go and like accelerate hiring, because especially where there are like there's a heavy engineering dominance in the business, because they can go and like obviously the first part of the value trap is this kind of automation part of the process where you're dropping your cost curve. They can go and like attack entirely new addressable markets with the same number of people, and might just go, do you know what, all of our people armed with all of these agents can actually just go and build a whole heap of new things that this business doesn't provide now. And so like, you know, the addressable market of a particular business might be X, but now it's, you know, it's 5X because they've just gone and like attacked multiple different markets in one go. And I'm like, oh, like, how might that play out? The problem is that's like not a uniform experience. Not every business is made up of like, you know, heavy engineering dominance or people who have the skills to go and work with AI and actually are motivated to go and attack new problems. So the reason why I kind of keep coming back to the value trap is I just think that's more of a uniform explanation for what's more likely to happen. And that these kinds of businesses that might actually go and seize that opportunity to increase headcount are probably outliers.
As you're saying that, it's more like the limiting, it's identifying new problems, or it's like the innovation component as opposed to like, oh, the addressable market is here now. The actual, that is a lag of a new innovation thing happening in that space. Like if I was out there hiring, I'd be going out to hire as many like different kind of thinkers. Like if we go back to like the sort of industrial schooling and all that sort of stuff, the people who are almost like outcasts and don't fit into that, who then think different, like the dudes who drop out and then go become Richard Branson or like all that sort of stuff. They're like, get them on your payroll.
The autists.
Well, I was just thinking about
I'll
not name anyone, but there's obviously someone we know where they said like the only thing they looked for when they were raising their kids was they just needed to be different.
Yeah.
It was like, and again, they were very deep in the AI space and could see all this coming. Which is like, it's going to be really valuable to not be just a standard slave from the factory. So.
Yeah. So if you got the like your kids have brains that just can't be. There's that thing like by year 3, that your brain becomes like institutionalized, and it's you go and it like aligns with like where if you like go back to kids and you like give them creativity like things, and it's like 99% of kids of a certain age are like creative geniuses, but then it almost gets educated out of them. School. Yeah, and then they become institutionalized, and they're like, hang on, I don't need to think of an answer. I need to think of the answer that like that sort of thing.
That was like a great TED talk when TED Talks used to be good, by Sir Ken Robinson, who speaks about like, you know, kids like, do schools kill creativity? Do you remember this? Was like from it was like it's probably one of the best TED Talks that have ever been produced, and it must be like 10-15 years ago now. And I can't remember exactly what that was about, but it was do schools kill creativity, and it's exactly what you're describing.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
They do. Most of the time you're told to shut up and get in line. Right? Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. That's interesting though. Is that something else that you guys have already?
We're going to become a homeschool. Like, interestingly, the last few episodes, I know you said you're a few behind.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about like what's the thing that remains at the end of all of this, and we said like it's the embodiment of the soul. Like, you are the qualia for the system. Like, these things are going to do a lot of the work that you need to do, but what they can't do is live in the world necessarily and experience things and experience something that's slightly suboptimal from like something that you could imagine it could be, or slightly better, like in that way that like there's no matter how good life gets for us, and our life is like way better than Henry VIII's life, for instance. Yeah. Like, there's always like, it's not better. Like, there's always something else that you long for. Like there's always that human longing where you're just like never quite happy, that pushes you forwards. Yeah. And then like it's the like, okay, capture that, and then your job is to capture that and then assemble like an army around you to make that problem go away as quickly as possible, and then that's how you'll get paid. And so it's almost like an entrepreneur's dream, is that you can just go about figuring out problems, experimenting with solutions, and getting them out into market very quickly, and then you move on and you do it again and again and again. Yeah. And your job is to kind of like experience the world and then, you know, shave off the rough edges.
Yeah. And that's like where that's the exciting part to me. Going back to like 100 years of progress in like a decade. Yeah. You play that out, and all of a sudden there's here's a wicked idea, and I can like pump it out and get it happening, and pump it out and get it happening. Almost like that, raising the ceiling of genius and scaling genius. It's like then all of a sudden the better ideas come to the surface. Doesn't matter if you're a multi-billion-dollar like when you got R&D and innovation, all this sort of stuff, and you can take it to market, versus you're the like college kid in a garage doing something like that sort of stuff. Like,
and we just drop those barriers to entry as well, right? So it's not even that like at the moment there's definitely like a centralization of a lot of that innovation experimentation into the States, and then particularly into like San Francisco. That's probably moved a bit in the last few years. But like, if you make it so that everybody has all that intelligence and all that knowledge from anywhere on Earth, then you end up just, in my view at least, just niching down into like, all right, well, there's like, yes, they may have a solution for that problem over there, but they don't experience things quite how I do in Perth, which has a different set of like you were talking about earlier. Like I live in a different way. I have a different network. I have different norms in the society that I'm in. So I would solve it slightly differently, and the solution for me will work much better in this context. So I think you start to then see the same sort of solutions cropping up all over the place, but it's slightly different context that makes all the difference for how it plays out inside like that particular society. So I get excited about this. To me, this is like how you decentralize a lot of the power in the world. Is that everybody starts to take more power on themselves in a more of a locality and a community. Yeah. So the norms of that community start getting enforced around then, and then that just undermines everything else on top of it. Like it's the norms that matter.
Yeah.
So if we can capture the norms, I'm good.
Yeah.
Sold.
That's sort of like one of the things I see playing out as well, and going back to the typist and finding purpose and all this sort of stuff. And it kind of plays to the stuff you're doing, like building things, and then the bit that the AI can't do, it pings off, and there'll be a shift to almost like a variation of like that gig economy where everyone is almost like their own solo operator, and they can do the thing that they really want to do.
Yeah.
It's like in a world of abundance where you can get everything you want. The decision is to figure out what you want.
Yeah.
And that becomes the thing, which is like the purpose question. But so like in this like gig economy sort of thing, everything becomes localized, and you don't like what is having a business and what is like you don't need an office space because you don't need to have all these people coming in because you're like getting all your work done like decentralized. But then the office space is also for the human community aspect.
Yeah.
And that's where like I see like little community hubs or like co-working things like this where there's hopefully like daycares and creches and all this sort of stuff to take care of all your needs, all that sort of stuff. Like that will just become...
Well, the kids just mingle it. Like,
well, yeah, there's...
you just have like a bunch of toys in the corner.
There's... Is it Simon Scuba Simon? There's like the actual... if like kids being actually grouped into ages and pushed through schools is actually like a different thing where like different educational things. You have like the teenagers mixed in and they help educate the other kids and all this sort of like all that sort of stuff. Like that's how I say like all of this evolving. It'd be interesting because then you go like, well, where are the resources? And it's like, well, what do schools become? Is that the evolution of a school? You just like start a construction company that redesigns schools and repurposes them into these community hubs, like something like that. Like,
I mean, I feel like the institution of school, like obviously you're not allowed to say bad things about schools, but like I think it's just become like a bit of a...
We'll send you to the principal's office.
It is a bit of like a prison for kids that is there to mould them into good factory workers, and that's where it all came from back in the day, from like the Prussian system of like, all right, we need a really compliant population so that we can send them to war to die. And it's like, all right, that's not what I most want for my children is to go to war and die. Like that sounds pretty horrific. So maybe there is a better way of doing it, but it's become so ingrained and like in society of like, all right, government is gonna pay for your school and you have to go to school, and if you kids didn't go to school, like it's such an imposition that they're always around the house. It's like, well, how am I going to think of anything or interact with anybody? But I think it has to only come from like just a different norm in society of like,
well, you
go to like a world schooling place or something like that, and they just everyone's there with their kids and they're working, and sometimes the kids go with that person, sometimes the kids go with that person, and it's just a slightly different way of living, but it doesn't fit in this. It's not
almost like tribal living, but at scale.
Yeah, I think tribes are a great example of. I think we would all feel very good in a tribe, if you know what I mean. Like, I think there's something about that that's a very natural way to live.
Yeah.
We did a whole episode on this, by the way, on education. So if anyone's listening and wants to explore this,
card just popped up in the left corner there. Maybe we shall see. See if we do any editing.
Because I just think this is such a fascinating... I can't remember what we titled
on learning. It was something about the future of learning, something like that.
Yeah.
It's permissionless, maybe. Yeah, because, I mean, if you think about it, this has been a problem for schooling since the internet, right? I mean, as the cost of information keeps trending towards zero, what's the value of education? Because it's essentially just, you've got a medium to provide information from a syllabus to as many people as possible, and it's generally like one facilitator or teacher to 30 kids in a classroom, and then that's kind of the scale that we've found works when we know that the ideal state is as close to one-to-one as possible. So that's where tuition is just really valuable, especially if you, to your point earlier, you can start to tailor it to learning styles and things like that. But I mean,
even remove the one-to-one. It's like it should be fluid.
Yeah,
because the one-to-one loses social interactions and all that sort of stuff, and like you need to have split attention to like going back to going from 2 kids to 3 kids, and all of a sudden there's always one that doesn't have attention.
Yeah.
Completely changes dynamics, right? But you got to learn all that sort of stuff. So it's almost, you need like a fluid ratio across things, and just more of a fluid thing anyway.
I think the other thing about individualized learning is like it taps into people's natural feedback loops, because like the thing that gives you like shortens the feedback loop to learning, which is just like progress. The thing that shortens that is the thing that like will ensure that learning becomes addictive. I think that's the thing that I've found with AI. Like I've actually found myself like really enjoying just diving into the process of learning a bunch of stuff with AI. And I'm not using AI to shortcut anything. I'm just using it as a tool to help me learn in a way that suits me. And then I've just found myself going down like rabbit holes constantly, because it's just so addictive. Because the feedback loop is like close to instant for me. Whereas like, you know, I did well in school, but I didn't necessarily enjoy school. Like I think it was just something that it was like, oh, I have to do this, everyone has to do this. I never really thought too much about it until I left school.
It was almost like the game you were playing.
Yeah.
Like you didn't know why you were playing it, but you knew you were playing it.
But if I'm going to play it, I may as well do it well.
Yeah.
Because we're all naturally competitive. I think that was the thing about our school as well. There was like a lot of healthy competition that was just baked into us.
Yeah. I was probably about like late 20s before I woke up and went, why am I doing any of this shit? Just, what's going on?
I mean, for me, like I think it finally ticked like maybe second year of law school, where I was just like, this is just super tracked. Everyone's hyper competitive, and I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? Like this just doesn't. Like that to me was like the fastest the hamster wheel was ever going, because you were just like constantly, and I was sat there in lectures. Everyone is absolutely loving everything they're doing, and I'm sat there like thinking about a business that I want to start. And then like a year later, it was like
everyone else loved what they were doing though. What if they were all just
I
doing
mean,
what you were doing?
I think it was. I'm sure there were other people who were like me that absolutely were.
So my purpose is to read documents super closely.
But in the main, a lot of the guys that I went to uni with, went to law school with, absolutely loved it. Like it just does naturally. You tend to gravitate toward.
Yeah, it probably ticks a lot of boxes for people as well. Right, it's a good place in society. People will respect you for what you're doing. Like you're seen in a certain way.
Interesting to see how that plays out in like the next decade.
It's just
like that.
Even shorter.
I think it just gets destroyed, but it's fine. Like,
but like the profession and all that'll be shake up. But like that. Like, well, you're going to grow up and become a doctor. Or you're going to grow up
what's the new status
what's
game?
What
you're going to be an experiencer when you're older.
Yeah, like there's this like I did a stint at a premium / luxury as luxury as a Perth brand can get, but the
Perth's got, there's a lot of money in Perth. I'm sure the luxury brands can do all right.
But no, the luxury brands come into Perth from other places.
Yeah. Okay, we don't have to go down
but the thing, there's a couple of dudes who, I forget what companies they're at, but like original sort of luxury brand dudes wrote this luxury strategy book, and it's all about how there was like kings and queens and lords and the noblemen and all this sort of like social hierarchy. And then when that disappeared, the luxury brands almost took that sort of social stratification and layered it in.
Yeah.
And you go like, what does that look like because that is a tell on human
I think there's always
right?
going to be
It's more about human like
societies.
Yeah.
Like, they don't go away.
So it's kind of like, what's the next version of that?
Yeah,
which is
sort of like
want to go down a rabbit hole.
Back because you have like the rich and the nouveau rich, right? Like which is like way more pronounced maybe in the UK than it is here. But I wonder if there's like a nouveau rich sort of coming where with the people that I got rich by being a doctor. Look down.
I feel like we kind of touched on this a little bit with our first guest, Joel Pember, a couple of episodes ago. But like, because I think this is like a really interesting point. It's like status doesn't disappear, desire doesn't disappear. We kind of like hovered on these things in this chat, and it like the point that I was asking Joel about was like, it feels to me in like this world of abundance when you still have those two states that are pretty dominant. Like everyone's still chasing status and they still have desires. It feels to me that brand becomes the way to like tap into that. I feel it becomes like even more valuable in a world of abundance in order to create this artificial scarcity, because that's essentially what the brand has to do in that state. And I'm kind of curious, like, just to like link it back to your expertise and the way you're thinking about all of this stuff. Like, how do you see brand?
I'd agree with that. I haven't listened to the episode yet, but I know like the Juice WRLD guys sponsor, or they're like hooked in with Ehrenberg Bass and all that, so they're like thinking about brand right. Like a lot of people don't even think about brand right in the first place. But I also, so the way I see it playing out and the way I'm sort of structuring my stuff is like the AI automation and that sort of piece, the organizational, like the human strategy piece, but then the brand strategy piece. And that is actually because brand is a human psychology like thing, and it's, you'll go and you can have a rack of clothes, or you can have a fridge full of water bottles, or you could have a whatever, and you'll be attracted to the one that like appeals to you more, or that you relate to more, or that sort of thing. So if everything is abundant, and for the things that I'm sort of saying, this goes back to what it's like, what do you do as humans, what do you want to do, where do you spend your time? And this will be different for everyone, right? Is like, some people won't care about water and they'll just go buy, or if you need to buy it, they'll just go get water. But then some people might go, well, I actually am in a period of my life where I want to look like this, or appear like this, or like want to be this sort of status, so I'm going to go get that one to then be a part of that sort of clique or that sort of thing, and that's where the brand stuff will come into play. For small businesses, all that sort of stuff. That's also what it was quite funny of like working through some stuff, and did this prompt, and basically had to resolve something in this way I'm structuring things, but it was like a brand thing. And I used Claude, prompted it to play the role of Mark Ritson, Byron Sharp, John James, Tom Roach, someone like just a whole heap of brand creative dudes. And I went, here's my problem, I want you guys to discuss it and like come back and let's like have a brainstorm. And that was kind of like that was it, right? And the actual generation came back almost like a script sort of thing, and it was like these creative dudes or whatever brand specialists sit down in a pub and they have like a blah blah blah. And I'm like, whoa, like I've never anything about how LLMs are like all probabilistic and all that, and like from that's the most probable thing was sitting them in a pub to do this, and then they have this like back and forth conversation. It's quite,
you can do this funny. Like even like it requires a bit of infrastructure to get put in. Maybe I'll code this actually. It's could be interesting, but is to have people like talk backwards and forwards like on an issue. So you can just have agents set up. So it's like, look, you're going to talk about this, and you're going to talk about this. Here are you. Here's you. Give them all different insights, all different backgrounds, all different like system prompts, and then you have them play out in a dialogue. Yeah. Like the solution to something, and you might like run it for, I don't know, like 20 iterations or something like this, and then people come back to it and just go like, oh shit, they actually really got somewhere, because you see the evolution of the idea over time. It's like someone will say something and the next person will come and go, oh, I really like that point. That point feels a bit weak to me, and I had a look over here online, and like, here's some stuff we could look into. And he's like, oh, that's a great point. Or he then defends the point. Yeah. It's like, no, I was thinking about it like this. Yeah. And they start to work out all of those little kinks in dialogue in a way that is like really interesting to see. So there's a guy, Pablo, it's like, there's this software engineering course like over in Madeira. Like, it's one of the things he's built for his software engineering tools is that it starts in dialogue with itself. Like, he will set an intent for like what they need to design, and then they have to set up all these different agents with like all the sort of like beliefs and values of like the particular systems that he's building around Bitcoin and Nostr, and then they talk about the idea till they get to a design. It's just like that's sick, hey? That's awesome.
There's a platform, a service platform SaaS tool Mind Hive, which is one that I've sort of like looking at, speaking to, but it's like a consulting tool, AI tool, and it does that, so you can create like online workshops, and which is essentially just a chat, but then invite whoever you want to this thing, but then also create AI agents, and the AI agents could be any sort of like, as long as there's enough information out there that they've been able to learn from, you can wrap it in a historical person or so you could, and then all of the like whatever you want to discuss has those people talking, and then they all just like chime in and throw their input, which like that's pretty cool. Like that's
they're really good at mimicking and role playing.
I mean, I do this in software a lot. Like when I first start a new feature, I'll like with RuCode, I go into like the architect role, and I say, look, here's what I'm trying to achieve. Now we're going to discuss this for a while, backwards and forwards, till we can come up with a plan. And it will come and say, okay, I see where you're trying to go, but like here's an area where you haven't considered. Like, what's the answer here? I'll answer backwards and forwards. He proposes a plan. I say, no, we're not done. Like, we're going to carry on, and then eventually we come up with a plan. But we do it in a way that, for me to like one-shot prompt that, like it wouldn't have worked.
It's not possible.
But in it, then inquiring after me over and over again and going backwards and forwards, I remember all the stuff I should have remembered at the start. It then gets more and more context as we go. Then it gets summarised in the plan before we execute it. And it's such a great way of just rounding out the edges of that sort of stuff.
I do this with multiple models as well. Like I'll have, you've got the agent obviously like in Cursor, but I'll go and like, and that is just executing tasks. So like, you know, that is way down the process. But I'll often have like Claude as the like engineering lead that's like trying to build out the PRD. But then I'll take what he's saying and I'll give it to, I mean, I've used Grok, I've used ChatGPT as the kind of like technical co-founder who's trying to think about it on a macro level. And it's like you built out a profile, like a role spec for the model ahead of time. And then I'm just there manually like copying and pasting like bits of chat between them. And then like you do like dial, and I'm obviously steering as well. So I'm trying to like shape this in the way I think it needs to go. But yeah, you do get some like pretty interesting outputs.
That needs an interface, and that's what's been, that's like something that's been bugging me, is being like having like it should be a new OS. So there should be like AI OS or whatever, and it is you can basically just sign up or whatever, call in whatever you want, and then just go, okay, here's the prompt for this one, and you say here's this. Now I'm opening up docs or whatever. Like
completely.
And hang on, you.
I think this is all emerging with like the MCP interfaces and various different things. Like it's all coming. And like you see the difference of like the reason so many people use Cursor, I think, is because it is a program on your machine, and therefore because it's a software IDE particularly. It has direct access through the terminal to anything your machine can do.
Exactly.
Like in a command line system, without having to like navigate with mouse and all the rest of it. Which, you know, like people that work with computers like that usually understand like how powerful that is and how much stuff you can do. But as soon as it gives the access to anything on your computer from the file system, and it can write and read whatever it wants, like it basically becomes almost like a full human.
I mean, I saw an example with like a Xero MCP. So it would, like, you've obviously got all of your accounting, your books in Xero, and then you're just using Cursor to just generate quick reports and generating quotes to send out to customers and invoices. But it's just like one shot, instead of like having to go through a bunch of steps in like a clunky, I find it clunky, a lot of people love it, Xero. You can just like literally quick prompt, output, done, and it's on a link somewhere. You can just send someone the link and it's done.
Well, because it can then get that information back and then run it through whatever computer program it then wants to write to execute that thing.
Exactly.
Like you would want a code execution environment of whatever agent the system it is that you've got in the future.
It seemed really counterintuitive when I first heard this, and then I started looking at examples of how people were using it, and I was just like, oh, like Cursor is just the interface for the entire business now. Like, which is crazy and also annoying because of
or RuCode.
I've never
or
thought of it
RuCode,
like that.
I mean, maybe more so RuCode after the like billing disputes on last week, but
What was that one?
I use RuCode these days. So I went from Cursor to Klein, which is like an open source plugin version that sits inside Visual Studio, and then client itself was then forked to something called Roo code, and it has like the one different ROO, like Roo, like kangaroo, like I thought you were Aussie. Come on, oi oi oi. And like, what it does is it gives you like just more direct roles. So you have like asking roles, but then you have like an architect, an orchestrator, a coder, a debugger, and so on. And it like particularly the way that it does the orchestration of the tasks. So you would plan out like at a high level everything with the architect, and then instead of going into code and it like slowly grinding through it goes into, I push it into this orchestrator mode, which will then split it out into like 40 subtasks that are each nicely constrained with just what it needs, and then it executes those. And the big difference is that you don't get like a massive blowout in the context. When I used to do that in client, I would like just blow like $10 on creating something and then not know whether it was good or not, and it'll come out as like 40 cents in Roo code because it only took like that subtext. And like if that subtext then goes off on a loop and gets stuck, you can pull it out of it and go back to the original plan. So it's just, it works really well.
I think the other thing in Cursor now is that you can actually, like when you're typing in a new prompt, you can select the actual file that you just want to review. Like you can individualize it down, which when we first started using it, you couldn't. It was just going and reviewing the entire code base every time you put a prompt through, which seemed really expensive and obviously doesn't scale particularly well. As the code base grows, it just becomes more and more of a nightmare.
This is what I want to get back to actually like trying out the latest stack graph stuff now. I haven't done, because I think that's probably in a state where I could just run that, have the whole thing locally, index all the code base, and then pull really good context from the graph and avoid even more stuff.
I love how we keep teasing graphs every week. Like every episode we do, we just like tease it a little bit more, but we don't actually like talk too much about graphs.
I was thinking just before we started, I was like, I'm going to build like an MCP server that records every prompt that I make from any of the different applications that I'm using. It'll be just like send this prompt to the MCP server, and on the back end I'm gonna like analyze like any new entrant to the graph. Like I'll analyze it and then pull out like what was good or bad about those prompts. And then what are the what's the better version of this prompt. What I want to try and build is like a self-reinforcing system, so that every time I start to prompt in the future, I can use my own MCP server of every prompt I've ever written in the past and the better version of all those prompts to then suggest a better version back to me. Because I was just thinking, I'm so sick of writing the same shit in this box like, over and over again.
This is prompt engineering.
What if I could just write, in the same way we did, it's like I did with Stackwork with the stubbing of the tickets. Is you got to a point you wrote enough of these bounties that instead of writing the bounty, you just stub out the bits that are different for that bounty, and then it filled in all the rest from the graph based on all the examples. And I was like, I could do this with prompts. I could just be like, review this, do that, build one of these, and like not have to do half of the prompting even.
But that is prompt engineering. Like I don't see that as a job in the future. I just what you've described is prompt engineering. Like
I think I can build that like MCP for myself once. And then if that's useful, I'll just
completely.
But
I love that. That's a great idea.
Or I'll stick it with an ID and give it a Nostrum queue that anybody can integrate.
But I do think that's like it is like a super interesting area that we're moving into with like these coding IDs and like what you can actually do with them beyond just building a product. Like you can vibe code as like vibe market. You can do all of these things.
So I have a question for Gav.
Okay.
I know we're not.
No interviews.
I keep thinking I'm not finding a way to slide it in. So I thought, all right, I'm just gonna stop and put my hand up, okay, like that. But I was wondering, like, there's a Hemingway statement where he's like, you write drunk and you edit sober, and the idea is like this is like one of the more, I think, intuitive ways of thinking about like, all right, there's something about the creative process which is two different minds at least. The person that writes and the person that edits are not the same sort of person, and that's one way of pulling it apart. But I'd be curious, like, when you've looked at like, okay, well, creativity is a process. Like, how would you start to define that process? Like, what are the different headspaces that you think?
Well, it's true. It's two different things, right? So the ideation and the judgment are two separate things. So you can't, to get idea volume, you can't judge. Because then you start going, oh, here's an idea. Oh, hang on, is that a good idea? and it's almost like context switching.
Yes. Yeah.
And like
they can't exist in the same space, right?
Like, so you basically like that's almost probably the thing that good creatives can do is just go, well, I'm having ideas now.
Yeah.
And we're just going to smash out ideas, and you just scribble, and some bit like I forget his name now, but ad lecturer at Curtin was had this story where, because the ad guys I found kind of get into human psychology, like to understand their brain, to then be able to do certain things, to then be able to make it behave differently, to come up with an idea that no one else would come up with. And that's where the unique sort of thing comes from, which is almost like a tweak or adjusting your settings of an AI or whatever for your volume game. Yeah, so there was a dude who would jump into a pool with a board and like a waterproof crayon and be like, I'm not going up for a breath until I've got 20 ideas or whatever, however many ideas, right? So it gets to a point where your brain is like, I need fucking air. So it starts behaving differently and pulling all these like random connections and like all that sort of shit. And he's like, I've got my 20, and goes up, and then he reads
it's
it.
It's all about dogs on unicycles. What the fuck? Like, going on here?
Yeah. And then it becomes a meerkat on a compare to market ad. But shit like that. So it's like the ideation piece has to be kept separate to the judgment piece. I don't know how you'd play that out, if this is where you're going to, like how you'd actually build that into a workflow, or if you'd need to.
I always think with these things, like you've got to think about it like you would do with humans.
Yeah.
First, and you'd say like, because if you wanted to be creative in one space and then like critical in another space, you would literally separate the spaces. And, like, they would not exist in the same space.
You'd have it playing different roles, I reckon.
You'd have time in between them. You'd have like, you might even get changed or something, or wear something different to be in different spaces. Like,
well, that's
you would get drunk and then sober. Like it's...
And that's where from a Hemingway thing, like that's because obviously your brain is working differently when you're drunk, but then you need to like critically adjust and go, oh, hang on, this needs to be able to be published, or this is what whoever wants, or whatever.
Yeah.
But the I forgot where I was going, like, or from an AI perspective and building that into a workflow, you'd almost go like, well, what is the type of context that I need to give to come up with the volume of ideas for the type of idea that I want to do, or who is the good person who's quite good at pulling this together, or what, like whatever that would be, and go like generate like however many, and then you'd have another like you could maybe do like some synth audience stuff and put it through like some like artificial focus groups or whatever of your target audience and all that sort of stuff to play off the different ideas to then refine them down to then move it on through a flow. But on the Hemingway question, like you, as it is taught, it is like just pump out like 1,000 ideas, and then maybe one or two of them will be like unique enough to be unpredictable and all that sort of stuff, and then you go to like, this one, let's like play those out again, and then it's like, are they campaignable ideas? What sort of idea are they? And can you play like can you put another 100 or 1,000 ideas off another thread of one of those and that kind of thing, to then get to like your unique creative execution.
It's an interesting area to explore. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. We're talking about like this distinction between divergent thinking and convergent thinking, and like, you know, all the productivity tools all around us, like they tend to channel us down more convergent thinking. But in order to like establish the state from which a good idea can actually emerge, you need that divergent thinking to occur. And I think this is like why people tend to come up with ideas when they're in the bathtub or having a shower and stuff like that. It's like you actually need to create the the environment for the idea to natively emerge in the first place. And it seems to me that like outside of those kind of spaces which we know of that tend to be quite good for ideation, it seems to me that that's the hard part to try and replicate.
That's contradicting myself here on the magic of creativity. That might be what creatives are good at. Like,
yeah, okay. But
that's what defines them. Is
I mean, it can still be a process, and they're good at the process. It's just that they don't.
But they know what it is.
Know it.
Yeah, it's like going into that state of mind, or being able to. It's almost like distracting your monkey mind in a bit, where it's like you're. So like I love listening to podcasts and audiobooks and that sort of stuff driving.
Yeah.
Because it's like I'm driving, and that's like the I don't know, there'd be some psychological name for the type of
it's like the level of
focus
task that you're doing it, but it's not taking up your whole mind. So
yeah, so then
there is I'm sure there's a word for this.
Is this the thinking fast and slow thing from like or is it a bit different?
I'd say it'd be a bit different to that.
Yeah, okay.
Thinking
there's a name
like
for
there might be layers of it in there,
but
there's
it's basically autopilot, but it's just enough distraction.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's like listening to a podcast so you could sleep on a plane or something like that. It's just engaging enough that you're going to pay attention to it, but not so much
but your mind
that
can
you
wander.
stay awake.
Yeah.
Your mind wanders and goes to sleep.
Yeah.
Whereas a movie, it's too much.
Right.
Like, it's,
So then, like, so listening, I can take it in more, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I want to come back to that one, and then how does that play off on that?
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff, like that. Yeah, like the getting in, and that's similar to like they go like you've got to sleep on it, which is like your subconscious, like essentially like processing it all and all that sort of stuff, and then you go back to it the next day, and which is like some of the stuff I'm doing at the moment. I've done that a few times. Left, I'm like, yes, I feel like such a sense of progress on this. I've like nailed it. And then the next day come back and gone, what the hell is that?
I wonder if there's
it makes no sense at all.
So I wonder if there's like a way we can learn prompt engineering from shamans. Yeah, which is that like if you think of it's not something that I have yet to have any personal experience with. Maybe like once the kids are squared away, but like if you think about someone talking about like ayahuasca or something like that, and like a lot of, or any psychedelic experience, like a lot of it seems to go into a setting, right? And it's almost like they've like got an approach to prompt and context engineering prior to entering the state. Like I wonder if they'd be quite good at thinking through, well, how would you do the setting here for this LLM to come into the world and just say just the right words and not the wrong words. Like, what is it?
Has anyone done that?
I don't know. Like, it was occurred to me.
Got into not done ayahuasca, but like got one of those shamans and just sort of like there'd have to be a
shaman 2.0.
Yeah, there'd have to be that sort of thing done, and then what the concept's like. That's almost like training a whole new model.
Yeah, I mean they're different. Like there's definitely like a methodology to it, right? Because they do this with a lot of the like scientific research that they've been doing into various like psilocybin and MDMA and stuff, but a lot of it comes down to like, all right, well, you've got to make sure like it's seen as important that the set and setting are correct, therefore there'll have been documented evidence of how you approach that. I wonder if there is just like a little bit of a it's not a world I know much about, but you wonder if there's a bit of a methodology for the person that's good at that probably knows how to be good at it. Like, is there something we can learn from that person about how we because you almost in a way like you birth these like LLMs into the world, these agents into the world for like 20 seconds then they do a task and then they go away, and we're saying like, look, just be born and then just be really good at stuff and fuck off and never exist again. And you kind of like there's got to be a way of like incanting them like with these weird spells that we put into it to say,
and they have
how do we do it
and
so
stuff.
You know more, so you only know the right stuff when you come in, and you only behave in the way that you should be. And there probably is like a way of like maybe it's all in like occult books around summoning demons is actually just got mistranslated over the years, and it was actually all about context engineering.
Yeah, this is how you summon LLMs.
Yeah, how you summon your LLM world before the sky god knocked them out.
Where because I was as you were saying that, I'm thinking like, you know, like the was it like the Godfather of AI dude? And
Jeffrey Puffy.
Yeah, he's all about like is the almost like the risk voice and the warning voice is like, oh, this is going to annihilate humans, all this sort of stuff. But it's like, is
so is everything. I mean, we're living with.
But is that just because we're all like shamaning this thing and we're just giving it a bad trip, and all of a sudden
exactly,
it's just...
you need to have a good trip. I've been listening to a bit of like Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I could tell.
It comes up a lot.
There were some threads that were coming up there that sounded familiar.
Oh, look, it's definitely like
great.
the sort of thing that I'm quite interested in.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's just life-wise, it's just not the time.
Have you read any of his books?
I am reading
Fingerprints of the Gods. That was his first one.
So,
yeah. It's a good one. Yeah.
What's your reading speed?
My reading speed?
1.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just read at 1x.
I don't know. I think it varies, actually, depending on what I'm reading.
You've got to estimate it. You're smart. How many...
I don't know. I read pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it does
Anyone
depend.
Who's a lawyer has to be
he's still competitive.
But I
read
will
pretty quick. I don't know, pretty quick.
But
Quicker
it depends.
Don't give him any cues.
Yeah. No, but it depends, right? Like, I think if there's...
Because essentially, like, your download speed, right, is like how quickly can you absorb information. And
it's an interesting question, because I actually think it is highly subjective. Like, when I'm reading a novel, like if I'm reading fiction, I read it super fast. I couldn't even try to guess it, but I'd get through a book.
Do you just read, or do you read with an audiobook overlay to the thing?
No, I just read.
Because that's like a trick for speed reading. You take an audiobook and you speed the audiobook up, and then you track with your finger along the words, and you do the whole thing, and then go. And there's like software you can use to then sync like the book and the audio for you.
I've got a bad habit of like, if I know the person who's written the book and I know what they sound like, I will start to like read it in their voice, and that will slow down my reading.
I get so annoyed when I've read a bunch of books prior to then finding out there's a film or something and the person's got the wrong voice, or even in that where like early on in the book I would have like invented, like, because as soon as I see a name, it's like I've now pictured this person and their clothes and everything else that's going on.
Just wanted to see if we wanted anything else.
No, we're good. So I would see this like the person in these clothes and this space, and like this is what they look and their hair and everything, and then like a chapter on it would tell me like, oh no, this person's got like blonde hair, and I'm like, no. Like I've invested like 2 chapters into this, and this person looks exactly like this.
This was everyone's reaction to Tom Cruise being cast as Jack Reacher.
I mean, that was ridiculous. I think they've got good Jack Reacher now. That looks
in
like
the TV show.
Yeah, he
guy's
looks
a
like a Jack Reacher.
He's huge.
Yeah, Tom Cruise is a bit ridiculous for that role.
Yeah, this was a tangent I wasn't expecting, but to be honest, I never know what to expect from our podcast. Like, they just go all over the place. But yeah, but Graham Hancock's like
shamaning LLMs.
We have like
that makes a lot of sense.
I think it does.
The more I think about it, because it's maybe a good way of explaining to it. It's like they need to be birthed. It is like summoning demons.
Yeah,
it's going to be that'll be the upskilling thing that's good everyone needs to do now. And that, like, going back to the strict directory versus Google Maps thing, that will be a tell on the people who can adapt to it versus those who can't. Some people just won't be able to figure out that they need to go, well, hang on, I don't just do the thing now. I have to sort of communicate or interpret how to do it to something. Let something else do the thing.
You know what? Product name, Spellbook. That MCP server that makes your prompts better.
Oh, that's good.
It gives you the incantations.
Yeah,
or incantation could be.
Incantation's nice as well.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's recorded now.
Potion, something like that.
We've got them.
Potion.
Yeah. Like, no judgment here. We're in creative.
This is it. Yeah.
We're drunk.
But you know, like, to come back to the idea piece, like, I tend to think that in order to generate those really insightful ideas, you actually need to step away from all of the technology. You know, because it's like you're harvesting like experiences, and the experiences are shaping how you think, and they're creating these connections, and those connections lead to different experiences and different outputs and inputs, and it is like the qualia point that Pete was making earlier. It's like you can't really replicate that with a model. It's like last week we were talking about, I gave this example at Rory Sutherland, you know, the guy from Ogilvy. You'd be familiar with him, I imagine. He gives this example of like, you know, they had in their office building, everyone was complaining about how slow the elevators were. And so they were like, okay, well, we could spend $1 million to try and speed these things up by 5%, or we could just spend $100 and put mirrors everywhere in the lift, and that solved the problem, because now everyone was like preoccupied with like watching other people and also their own appearance, and it kept themselves busy, and they were basically distracted while they were in the lift. And it's like that kind of like creative thinking. Like there's a mechanical solution and there's like a really creative solution.
Yeah.
And
going back to, it's like perception management, that essentially, but how the human nature tell is like you're getting to a point that you're complaining about the lift being too slow. Like take the stairs, man. Like,
but
that's even slower.
A slightly quicker lift is slightly better.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've used the lift in this building. It's not quick.
But it's almost like there's, no matter what, people find something to complain about, or
of course,
that's a tell on the people versus
it is more just like the creative application to solving for that, which is like you could have gone down a really like kind of more productive engineering based approach to solving that problem, which would result in like trying to optimize the lift speeds by 5%, and you'd spend a shitload of money doing that.
He's got so many good examples. I mean, the other one I think we talked about was like they talked about the Eurostar being too slow. They said, right, well, okay, speeding up the train could cost you like hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, or we just get some hot female and male models and they serve everyone champagne, and that costs $100,000 and job done. Like they'll beg us to slow the train down.
That's true. It's like identifying what the real problem is.
Exactly. It's like, look, the problem isn't that, it's something else. That it's like there's some sort of unmet need psychologically that's going on, which is exerting itself as, oh, this is too slow. I need to get there. It's like, well, you could have just left earlier.
It's like
it's probably quite fast enough. Is it worth that much money to go faster? Or if you're more comfortable, does the whole thing go away?
Yeah, it's like a brand researching thing. Is you don't actually ask customers what they want because they don't know what they want.
Yeah,
or they'll tell you something, or they're past year 3, so they're like their brains are thinking about what the answer is that they should be giving or what you want to hear and all that sort of shit.
It's the faster.
So you've actually got it. Yeah, you've got to actually set up your questionnaires and all that to capture the information to then be able to correlate back what it was that they actually want.
It feels to me like you game that as well. I mean, that's what political surveys are, right? Like the way you structure a series of questions in a survey, you can essentially like game out the outcome that you want from the survey.
Yeah. If you've got motive and
but that's the problem, right?
It's
like
sort of stuff.
Vested interest is always like in some way baked into a lot of this stuff.
On a brand side though, you want to eliminate that because you're not
represented.
You're not getting your market orientation. You're not understanding the what is out there. So then you can actually, this is actually what's going on. How can we change what we're doing, or where do we want to do? If you're sort of manipulating the data, I suppose it depends on whether you're actually the company who wants to know, or if you're the company that's been hired by the company that want that, and then but
because sometimes like this is just like people working with people. Sometimes you hire someone to just hold a mirror back up to your own points of view.
Oh man,
that's the problem. Yeah.
I used to hate getting sales dudes who just like they ask you all the questions, it's like, and then they present. I'm like, dude, I already know that. That's exactly what I told you. Like, you haven't told me anything new. You just wasted my fucking time. Thanks.
Yeah.
See ya.
So you hired me to tell you back.
Well, it's like you see that a lot with consulting, right? It's an insurance policy more than anything else. It sits in the top drawer, and if anything goes wrong, we've got someone to blame. It's like plausible deniability at that point. It seems to work. It's expensive, but it seems to work. How are we going on time? I think we're probably we're almost going to get kicked out of here.
I think so. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, with that in mind,
not a bad place to wrap, I think.
Well, what else have you got, Gav? Like, what's your sign off?
What's my sign off?
What's your favourite bit of the discussion?
I quite liked your shamaning.
Yeah, that was new. That was a very new thought.
That was good
because it's almost like layering in pre-modern medicine sort of stuff. And you've got like Chinese medicine, all that sort of stuff, and it's like the clash between those applied to AI now versus, or like current life now versus future AI life, and how all that plays out. And then you drop that down into, what else did we cover, like stratification of society and schooling and all that sort of stuff. I don't know, I've never signed off a podcast before.
That's the good stuff.
So you